Hollywood loves a little controversy, but not when it comes to exploding heads, alien parasites, and giant maggot assaults. Today we're diving into 15 sci-fi films from the 80s that freaked out censors so much, they literally banned them. We're talking about the underground gore fest that got tapes seized by the cops, the sci-fi classic that Tarantino admitted actually scared him, and the dark sci-fi comedy so violent the director had to fight censors 11 times. Basically, movies that made Hollywood completely lose its mind. Let's get into it. This one's a super low-budget horror sci-fi movie directed by cult filmmaker Don Dohler. Story's dead simple. An alien crashes into a small Maryland town and starts blasting locals with a ray gun, ripping to shreds anyone who comes near. It's up to the town sheriff to somehow kill the thing. It's mostly interesting because J.J. Abrams, the Star Wars guy, actually got his start right here, scoring this movie when he was just 16. He and Dohler met through some magazine called Cinemagic, exchanged some letters, and next thing Abrams knew, he was doing music for a banned sci-fi gore fest. The effects were actually pretty graphic for the time. Heads blowing apart, blood and guts everywhere. The whole deal. Honestly, it's pretty mild compared to today's stuff, but back in the 80s, censors completely freaked. Dohler himself didn't even like explicit gore or nudity, but he knew audiences expected it, so he put it in. It ended up being controversial enough to land on Britain's infamous video nasty list, meaning cops literally seized tapes from stores. It seems nuts now, but Mad Max 2, the iconic Mel Gibson one, actually got fully banned in multiple countries when it first came out. Like, not just censored a bit, fully banned. In the US, Warner Brothers didn't even call it Mad Max 2 because they figured no one saw the first one. They also chopped out 8 seconds of violent footage just to avoid an X rating. But internationally, Sweden, New Zealand, West Germany, Finland, all of them straight up banned it. Sweden literally called out the movie's constant dehumanizing violence. In America, certain southern drive-ins flat out refused to show it because local church groups thought it was morally anarchic and sexually confusing. Of course, the bans made it even more popular. People needed to know what the fuss was all about. Today it's considered one of the most influential action movies ever made, but at the time it scared the hell out of censors everywhere. This one starred Demi Moore in her first big movie role, though she later called it the worst movie she ever made. Fair enough. Basically, it's set in a dystopian future after an atomic disaster where America is controlled by a ruthless group called the Merchants. They force a scientist to create a killer parasite to keep control of people, but he escapes, with the parasite inside him. So he's running around trying to destroy it before it kills everyone, with merchants hunting him down. The grossest scene back then was this parasite dripping onto people, in full 3D. Sure, the parasite was clearly a cheap rubber puppet, but audiences still freaked out. In the UK especially, the movie ended up banned and listed as a video nasty, meaning you could literally get arrested for owning a copy. Looking at it now, it's honestly laughably tame, but back then it was enough to get censors panicking. Italian science fiction horror, riding the success of Ridley Scott's Alien. The plot's about as basic as it gets. Alien eggs show up on Earth and anyone who touches them immediately explodes. Guts everywhere. Unlike Alien, which built actual suspense and had just one iconic chest-bursting scene, this movie had exploding guts from start to finish. Just non-stop splatter. Back in the UK, it got lumped into the infamous video nasty panic. Literally got labeled obscene. Owning a tape was illegal and police actually arrested people over this movie. It took until 2004 for it to finally get a full, uncut UK release. Funny thing is, watching it today, it's just cheap, ridiculous, and barely shocking at all. It's basically just a bunch of gore thrown at the camera to cash in on Alien, but apparently in the early 80s that was enough to become a huge moral threat. This one's basically Alien's trashy British cousin. Low-budget UK horror sci-fi where some archaeologists exploring alien ruins on another planet run into trouble. One crew member gets impregnated by an alien and immediately turns murderous, picking off her teammates one by one. It cost around £1 million to make. Half the budget came from the Shaw Brothers, those kung fu movie legends, which explains the cheap-looking sets. Still, they went big on gore. And censors immediately freaked out. UK censors demanded cuts right away, but even after edits, it still landed on the official video nasty list. Tapes got seized under Britain's Video Recordings Act. Critics tore it apart too. The Los Angeles Times called it one of the most excruciatingly violent and nauseating space horror films in recent memory. They said, "The torture, inhumanity, and exploitation are ferocious. This is dangerous and vile filmmaking." BAFTA dismissed it as pure commercial garbage that had no place in British cinema, but at least Roger Corman loved it. And speaking of Roger Corman, this is one of his sci-fi horror movies, so right away you know it's going to be cheap, sleazy, and somehow still entertaining. It's about a spaceship crew who land on a remote hostile planet, and one by one they're killed off by their own worst fears, literally coming to life. But the only thing anybody remembers now is this one incredibly notorious scene where a giant maggot sexually attacks and kills a female crew member. That moment alone got censored everywhere. In the UK, they had to chop 14 seconds out of the scene just to put it on VHS. And honestly, after that insane moment, the rest of the movie barely registers. People just think of it as the giant worm assault movie, which is kind of unfair. Because despite everything, it's actually pretty well made for a Corman film. Sets look decent considering the budget, camera works all right, the actors are trying their best, and the story itself has this dark psychological element, almost like Event Horizon way before Event Horizon even existed. Yeah, the sexual violence is a major issue, no question, but it still earned its place as this weird piece of cult cinema. Once you've seen it, good luck forgetting it. Xtro is an ultra-low-budget British sci-fi horror about a guy who gets abducted by aliens, then shows up again years later totally changed, definitely not human anymore. His son starts getting weird supernatural powers too, and from there, it goes totally off the rails. Back when it first hit UK theaters, it passed uncut. But in the middle of that whole 1980s panic about violent home videos, the whole video nasty controversy, it got caught up in the sweep. Never officially prosecuted, but still basically blacklisted for years. But the funniest thing is the director, Harry Bromley Davenport, admits openly he and the writers were completely high while writing the script. All those bizarre scenes, the toy soldier scene, that gross alien birth scene, just random weird ideas they threw in because they thought they'd look cool. Davenport himself says he's kind of embarrassed by it now, but also proud it's remembered as one of the grossest, most messed up sci-fi horrors of the 80s. Today, everybody calls John Carpenter's The Thing a masterpiece, but in 1982 it bombed hard and critics absolutely hated it. Way too graphic, way too hopeless. It got banned outright in Finland for gore, and other countries made cuts before they'd show it on TV. People sometimes say it flopped because E.T. came out the same summer. Audiences wanted friendly aliens, not shape-shifting monsters. But the bigger reason might have just been that it was so damn bleak. There's no happy ending, just paranoia, mistrust, and intense dread about who might be human and who isn't. Even Quentin Tarantino, who basically never gets scared in horror movies, says openly, this is the one film that truly scared him. John Carpenter himself said the blood test scene is the reason I did the movie. I thought I could do something special with it. But of course, as we all know now, audiences back in the 80s didn't get it. They hated the ending, hated how unresolved it felt. Carpenter didn't care. That bleakness was exactly what he was going for. Still, at the time it bombed so badly he got fired and was out of work for a while. Took years before people finally started calling it a classic. Not everybody's convinced though. There are still plenty of people who think it's a piece of trash. David Cronenberg really went all in on this one. James Woods plays a sketchy cable TV guy who discovers a secret broadcast that's basically nonstop torture and murder. But the twist is, it's not just disturbing TV, it's literally altering your brain. Tumors, hallucinations, your whole reality falls apart. Not surprisingly, censors went nuts. In the UK, they wanted 27 different scenes chopped. Australia banned it completely. In America, the MPAA forced Cronenberg to edit it 5 separate times just to avoid an X rating, and that was after he'd already toned down the script from its original version. But what really freaked people out wasn't just graphic violence. It was the idea behind it. That media, especially TV, could literally reprogram your brain. Body modification, mind control, brainwashing, this stuff was way ahead of its time. Universal totally panicked, barely promoted it. Theaters wouldn't show the full version, and some studio execs even begged Cronenberg to change the ending, make it less depressing. Right now, decades later, it doesn't even feel like science fiction. It feels more like a prediction. James Woods himself later admitted they thought they were making weird sci-fi, but actually ended up making a documentary. This crazy New Zealand sci-fi gore flick is about a kid brainwashed by a mad scientist into murdering his own parents. Later, as an adult, he escapes from an asylum, heads to the scientist's island, and ends up fighting mutant freaks everywhere. It's famous mostly because it got banned pretty much everywhere. Australia immediately banned it for excessive graphic violence. UK censors cut almost 5 full minutes before it could even hit VHS. It even got temporarily banned in Finland. And honestly, it's easy to see why. It's basically just a non-stop parade of exploding heads, needles stabbed in eyeballs, chemical lobotomies. No logic, just pure chaotic gore. Zero narrative structure, zero sense, confusing plot twists, characters completely insane. It's basically like a totally messed up, drugged out version of The Island of Dr. Moreau. In America, it only played some midnight movie showings, then got dumped onto VHS by Paragon in a badly edited version in 1987. Paul Verhoeven had a hell of a time getting RoboCop past the censors. The MPAA hit it with an X rating multiple times. Verhoeven was pretty new to Hollywood at that point. He had no idea the studio would freak out so much over the violence. He later said execs kept telling him, "Paul, this is America, not Amsterdam." 2 scenes especially drove the MPAA crazy. First, the toxic waste scene with Clarence Boddicker, originally 45 seconds, had to cut it down to about 7. And second, that boardroom scene where the malfunctioning robot just shreds a guy to pieces. The original cut was 3 times longer. You saw every bullet tearing into him. Conservative groups called for boycotts. Finland and Germany censored the hell out of it. Singapore flat out banned it for having anti-social values. In the UK, the BBFC demanded 26 cuts before it could even play theaters. Didn't matter. Movie made bank. Over $53 million off a $13 million budget. Over time, critics finally woke up and realized it wasn't just mindless action. RoboCop was actually a violent satire of 80s America. And here's a crazy fact. The fully uncut version of RoboCop wasn't even released publicly until 2014. One of the craziest exploitation films to ever come out of Australia. Starts out as this dark dystopian sci-fi movie, then quickly turns into full-blown grindhouse insanity. The plot's simple. Prisoners in a futuristic re-education camp are dumped into the jungle and hunted by the ruling elite for sport. And it's gory as hell. Cannibalism, dismemberment, a mutant dude with a flamethrower, basically everything exploitation fans could want. It was so extreme they had to cut more than 20 minutes just for international release. Even then, the UK banned it until 1985, tossing it right onto the notorious Video Nasties list. It ran into trouble with American censors too. New World Pictures had an edited version approved for an R rating, but accidentally sent the fully uncut version to theaters instead. This one's Cronenberg at his best. You probably know Scanners from that scene. The one where a guy's head literally explodes. That happens less than 15 minutes into the film, and it immediately caused huge problems. Finland banned it completely for 10 years. Religious groups picketed American theaters, claiming Cronenberg used actual dead bodies for the effects. The movie's about telepaths, called scanners, who can basically make your head blow up just by concentrating hard enough. It's a simple idea, but Cronenberg's execution made it legendary. Special effects genius. Dick Smith built a realistic dummy head, filled it with hamburger meat, dog food, and fake blood bags, then literally blasted it apart with a shotgun from behind the camera. Completely practical effects at their most extreme. But underneath the gore, Cronenberg was making a point about pharmaceutical companies and human experimentation. It struck a nerve, especially after real-life scandals like the thalidomide disaster. Cronenberg even claimed some drug companies threatened to sue to try to shut the film down. Germany threw scanners on their video nasty list. Japan chopped out almost 7 full minutes of gore. In the UK, police literally raided video stores, confiscating any copies they found. Even the original poster got banned from public transport. Critics initially trashed it, just called it disgusting exploitation. But those effects became iconic. Even John Carpenter later said scanners changed horror cinema forever. And honestly, it still stands as proof that great practical effects can beat CGI any day. Terry Gilliam almost completely blew up his Hollywood career with this one. Universal Studios hated Brazil, thought it was too dark, too depressing. So behind Gilliam's back, studio president Sid Sheinberg secretly recut the movie with a happy ending. Gilliam only found out weeks before release and completely lost it. So he fought back. He literally bought a full-page ad in Variety publicly calling out Sheinberg by name. He even smuggled out a print of his version and secretly screened it for critics. And when it won Best Picture from the LA Film Critics, before Universal even officially released it, they finally caved and released Gilliam's original cut. Didn't end censorship problems, though. Sweden chopped up the torture scenes, Japan cut Robert De Niro's character completely out. Singapore banned the entire film for being anti-government. Gilliam paid a huge price. Studios labeled him as difficult and stopped giving him funding. Gilliam later admitted, "Brazil cost me years of my life, and probably my sanity." This one's a weird, wild dystopian sci-fi movie straight out of Germany, heavily inspired by William Burroughs, who even appears in the film himself. Plot's pretty wild. A musician figures out he can start riots just by replacing calming background music at burger joints and elevators with industrial noise music. Eventually, that sparks an entire revolution. And the riots you see in the movie were actually real. They filmed actual riots happening in Berlin during Ronald Reagan's presidential visit. Obviously controversial as hell. And after this movie, the team behind it never made another film again. For years, it was nearly impossible to see. Totally forgotten, unavailable, basically lost to time. It finally got re-released on Blu-ray in 2019 by Vinegar Syndrome. But even now, it's mostly remembered just for being so bizarre, provocative, and totally unique. Exactly the kind of film you'd expect from mid-80s Germany, and from anything connected to Burroughs.